Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Ugnayan, Likas-Bayan's podcast, where we have regular open discussions so that people may remain vocal in critical discussions, learn about timely social political issues, and understand the different standpoints and perspectives of each other. I'm Mary, and with me here today is Aaron.
Hi, we'll be your hosts for this episode. Kumusta ka, Mary?
Well, for me, I'm feeling excited. Ikaw naman, Aaron.
A little anxious. This is the first time we'll be doing this, but very positive naman. And we hope you guys, everyone tuning in, is safe and well during these times too. Before anything, Mary, nasubaybay mo ba yung Tokyo Olympics?
Of course, ang ganda nga nung story ni Carlo Paalam. Sobrang inspiring na isa siyang mangangalakal ng bakal. Tapos ngayon, he won a silver medal made from recycled old gadgets. From scraps to silver talaga. The medal really symbolizes his life story and bringing his family out of poverty.
Yeah. I mean, Heidelin Diaz and Yurmi Marshall too. Like both athletes at the point in the middle of their training reached out on their social media accounts, right? For financial aid to cover the cost of their travel and expenses. I mean, from that alone, like as athletes, the disparity, I guess, financially was really apparent.
Yeah, true, I agree. But do you know who stole the show this Olympics? Our very own Marjeline Dedal. Pero alam mo ba, nung teenager siya, nagbebenta sila ng kwek-kwek just to make ends meet. Even with the lack of support from the government and proper facilities, Marjeline became one of the best skateboarders from Cebu.
Yeah, heroes of their own journey for sure. It's apparent that a part of their journey and achievement were their humble beginnings. Though, I'm really curious, Mary, how do these connect to our topic today?
Well, don't worry, as we've all got something to learn about that disparity. And today we'll be discussing this topic with our guest speaker. He is a graduate from the Philippine Normal University with a degree in Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in history. He is an Araling Panlipunan teacher in the junior high school, teaching grade 8 world history, grade 9 economics, and grade 10 contemporary issues.
He is also an MA candidate, Master of Arts in Basic Education Teaching in Ateneo de Manila University. His research interests include grit, self-efficacy, and gender representations. He is also a former school paper magazine moderator for Club Recorder. Currently, he hosts a podcast channel entitled Usapan with Sir Ian, a podcast about buhay-buhay.
With that being said, we are so happy to formally introduce Sir Ian Magallano. How
Hello
are you
guys!
today? Hi, sir.
Magandang buhay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
How are you today po?
I'm good. I had series of meetings today, but I'm excited. I'm excited to be with you guys.
We're excited too, sir. I mean, this is the first time we'll be doing this, and at the same time, it's a lot to. I guess it's also something that we're doing this with someone who has experience with podcasts. Um, but going into it, sir, did you catch the Olympics too?
Yes, somehow, but most on reading the articles and news about it.
How'd you find it, sir? I mean, I was very inspired.
Yeah, as a history teacher, I do love our standing in the Olympics. Specifically, I think we are first in the Southeast Asia. Okay, getting the medals and such. And I'm very proud of Heidelin Diaz and yung kanyang mga receive from benefactors and the government, no, very amazing. Worth it
Yeah,
naman for her and for all the athletes talaga na nagpapakahirap sa kanilang craft.
Yes, very deserving naman po sila ng mga
Mm-mm.
prizes nila.
Yes.
yeah, sir. Like before the conversation, the podcast was recording. Like we were talking about the dole out method, right? And
Mm-mm.
like before we get into that, like or talk about it like along with the other hero symbols for our Olympians. Like I think with all that they've overcome outside the sport, especially monetarily, I think
Mm-mm.
it really speaks to what a Filipino can achieve with their own effort as well as with the support of a community with them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it reminds, at least for me, it reminds me of how it's a reality and it's present. I guess with the disparity we've been talking about earlier. I guess it's no surprise we're talking about the socio-economic divide. Sir, maybe you could start by defining for us what exactly is a socio-economic divide.
Okay, so I think socio-economic divide, according to Katani 2007, is a gap between the most poor or extremely poor and extremely wealthy people. According to the United Nations, world's wealth is saturated to small amount number group of people. This entails a lot of issues, especially on the disparity of opportunities and rights that must be enjoyed by many people. In other perspective, we can see to it that socio-economic divide in a globalized perspective, no, there is a conflict between small and weak economies, or the Western versus the poor countries. Also in racism and culture, we can actually see that there are a lot of discrimination that's happening, not only here in the Philippines, but it is rampant abroad, like white versus blacks. Here in the Philippines, the foreigners versus the Filipinos, and even in our ethnic groups, di ba? The Ilocanos versus the Manileños, the Cebuanos versus the Manileños. Also, we can consider socio-economic divide in terms of gender. There is income inequality, the gender pay gap, okay, and also the access to education. I think Western countries, no, has lot of access to education as compared to the developing countries, no. Mas onti talaga yung nakakapag-aral sa kanila, especially African countries.
It's really from that alone, like it's really a broad topic. Like
Yeah.
I
There are
think,
a lot of factors.
yeah, I think it's really a broad topic, and we we have to try to narrow it down. For you, sir, like we can the focus. Would you like to focus on the monetary, the educational aspects in the Philippines? What else would you like to include, sir?
Since it talks about socio-economic divide, I would like to discuss everything about socio-economic status that entails social classes and the monetary part of it, the finances part of it.
So, sir, before the start of the podcast, me and Aaron were chatting with you the other day about dull mentality, since
Mm.
we aren't really that familiar to it. Though we found it interesting, some of our viewers may not be familiar with it. So, sir, can you explain what dull mentality is and how it
Mm.
relates to our topic?
Dole mentality, same with learned helplessness. Parang from there are certain policies, or should I say programs of the government that includes giving people help or money, kay parang yun yung nagbibigay sa kanila ng parang ng problem na hindi sila matutulungan sila in their finances, but then again parang you are not teaching them to earn their own money. So parang you give them fish, okay, but you don't teach them how to fish. And in the long run, no, doon na lang aasa yung mga tao. Hindi na sila magtatrabaho, they will become lazy, doon na lang sila aasa sa parang monthly na nare-receive nila. So that's what dole mentality is.
Sir, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier about dole mentality specifically. And one
Mm-mm.
of the things that came out of our conversation, along with other many things, is that it's apparent that no one is, at least with the socio-economic divide, which this was established earlier. Like it's apparent that we were born into this, and it's something we can't control. I guess the classes, right?
Mm-mm. Yeah.
And like, how does or what are the types of classes? How does the type and status of our country's economy and classes influence our socio-economic divide?
To answer that question, there are two things to consider in the in there are two things to consider when we talk about the socio-economic divide. We have to consider that there are two types of countries, the developed and the developing countries. According to Roser, no, from the University of Oxford, data showed from 1988 to 2011, developed countries have less socio-economic divide than the others. Some developing countries from 1988 to 2011, Pilipinas ay kasama doon, have high or loose socio-economic divide. And with that, no, makakaapekto siya like sa access to education, sa opportunities, and the right to have decent work. In the Philippine context, according to 2018 PIDS, Philippine Institute for Development Studies, there are 8 social classes in the Philippines based on monthly income. So as to mention them,
Or
we
the
start again social classes based on monthly income. Okay, starting from the bottom, the poor, no, according to PIDS, they earn 10,957 below. Okay, for low income but not poor, their monthly income ranges from 10,957 to 21,940. Now, for lower middle, we have 21,914,000 to 43,828. Next will be the middle class, the upper middle but not rich, and then the wealthiest of them all are the rich ones with income above 219 and 140 pesos. Okay, if you somehow belong in a particular group, no, there will be a variation, okay, with some aspects of with some opportunities like choosing the school that you want to study to, or maybe yung health mo maapektuhan din siya kasi hindi kaya ng sahod mo, the opportunities, no, and the right to have a decent work, yun yung nakakaapekto doon sa iba't ibang social classes. Okay, ayan.
As you said po, that the Philippines is still a developing country,
Mm-mm.
which means that we have a big socio-economic divide. So
Mm-mm.
we would like to know, how did it reach such a state, and how was it also affected by the current pandemic?
Kasi the term developing country was taken from the first world, second world, and the third world. Yun kasi medyo discriminating kasi yung pagpapangalan natin sa first, second, and third world. Parang may rank siya. That's why, in a positive sense, they replace third world to a developing country. Parang you are looking forward for that kind of development that this country will attain. Sa Philippines naman kasi, I think tayo ay developing countries. It has a lot, we have to consider a lot of things Okay, aside from our GDP and our GDP and GNP, no, according to NEDA 2020, the economic state of the Philippines in terms of GDP went down from 6.7% to negative 16.5 in the quarter 2 of 2020. Why? Because it was the onset of the pandemic. Okay, because of the pandemic, there was a high unemployment rate. Maraming mga tao ang hindi na nakapagtrabaho, bumagal yung operations in terms of trading, in terms of manufacturing, no? This was also supported by Aldaba 2020 from NEDA. He said that there was a loss of 1.1 trillion per month in our country. And according to Philstar, no, according to PSA data, there was 4.2 million Filipinos who were unemployed that time. So loss of jobs means loss of income as well. Ayun.
earlier you mentioned something about you mentioned the following, like pertaining to education, healthcare, and access. And I think in terms of access, especially during the pandemic, I've been reading over the past, I don't know how long I've been in a lockdown, but I guess over the past 2 months, the readings that show that it's the poorest of the poor. I don't know what exactly between the eight social classes, but they're the most affected
Yeah.
in terms of the lack of access. How do we see that today?
In terms of the poorest of the poor were highly affected, according to VP Lenny Robredo. Ito yung mga nasa laylayan. Kasi hindi naman lahat ay kumikita ng 10,957 per month.
Also,
Paano
it's those
kung,
below that.
yeah, below that, below the yung poor social economic classes, yung tinatawag nating poorest of the poor. Now, in terms of access to education, of course, they don't have a choice but to somehow to enroll into a public school system. If not, if hindi pa rin kaya, okay, they will resort to, like, the parents will hahayaan nila their kids to stay at home, or yung iba mapipilitan to work. Okay? Yun yung tinatawag natin na not everyone has have access to education, kasi yung iba hindi naman talaga nila choice. Kung may choice sila, mag-aaral sila, but because of their social class or their standing na status in our society, napipilitan silang wag na mag-aral at magtrabaho na lang. Yun yung isa sa mga nakakalungkot na mababasa natin sa social media, that most of the Filipinos meron silang thinking na with sipag, sa sipag talagang talagang yayaman ka, sipag at tiyaga lang, pero hindi kasi lang yun yung sapat na recipe for success. Diba? Parang look at our farmers, 'di ba? Parang napakasipag niya, no? Parang from madaling araw magtatanim, magsasaka, magpapahinga ng onte, babalik ulit sa pagtatanim at pagsasaka. Masipag naman sila, but they were devoided or neglected of the system that does not really care about farmers. Okay, as compared to farmers sa Japan, alam naman natin na yung mga farmers, pag sinabing farmer ka sa Japan, mayaman ka na kaagad. But here in the Philippines, kaya pag sinabing farmer ka, parang yan yung profession na ayaw ng mga estudyante nila na maging after years of education. Ayaw nila maging farmer kasi mababa ang kita. So yun, minsan wala kasi talagang choice yung mga tao na mag-aral, kasi yun yung kinalakhan nilang system. So the social classes really affect them, no?
Yeah,
So if,
it's a very sad reality po na your social class basically dictates your standing in society and what your future or your life has in store for you. And true po na very frustrating na hindi lang naman po talaga hard work and discipline yung kailangan para to succeed in life. Kasi uh, ako po, I've seen a lot of stories in social media yung from the lower class na very hardworking nga. So, pero wala naman tumutulong. So, even though they say na this kid will go somewhere, parang just because like may exposure siya sa social media, parang hindi lang po yun yung kailangan to have a successful life na aangat po sila sa society. So in that case po, we've heard that poverty and the different social classes are needed for society to function. So in light of this po, is socio-economic divide inherently negative, or is it necessary to an extent because it serves a certain purpose, or is it only negative once it reaches a certain point of unjust inequality?
Actually, to answer your question, it is somehow utopic in nature to imagine a world that is 100% equal to all of its sector, and there are no social classes. There are no poor, there are no wealthy, lahat pantay-pantay. It's truly utopic. Parang ganun yung pananaw. And also sa pananaw naman ng mga Buddhist, no, parang um, lahat ng trabaho may sense. Parang sino magse-segregate ng basura kung walang basurero? Sinong magpa-plan ng economy kung walang economist? Okay, but I would like to focus more on the concept of UN's reduce inequalities. I always think that socio-economic divide is really negative. That was supported by Bucknell 2016 in his book, The Problem of Social Inequality. But thinking of inequality that is based on capitalism itself is really a problem. The praise ang mahirap ay patuloy na naghihirap at ang mga mayayaman ay lalong yung mayaman. It's really evident in our society nowadays. We at least want to stress that everyone must have opportunities, access to education, better health care, away from discrimination in every facets of the society. Hindi lang exclusive yung mga yon for the wealthy people. Lahat sana nabibigyan ng opportunities.
Sir,
Yun.
I want to ask, like, how does social mobility factor into the current junction we are at? Like, with um, how should societies strive for more flexible social mobility?
Mm-mm.
And I think that's the goal of reducing inequality at hand. And I think at least like we've touched upon the education, the healthcare, the access, but I don't think we've been able to talk about the autonomy that each person has, or in this case, like each Filipino has. And how do you think that social mobility factors into the topic? Like, how do we strive for social mobility opportunities for the members? And is there anything good about keeping people in their social class?
Kasi uh, yung last na statement mo, yung keeping people in their social class, parang is very Hunger Games type. 'Di ba? 'Di ba nakita niyo yung social classes ng Hunger Games? Dapat doon tayo sa movie na ewan ko kung napanood niyo na The Platform. Yung parang 'di ba from yeah, 'di ba very symbolic yun ano. So we should mobilize our government policies as well as our leaders to be makatao, to be humane with their government programs and policies, to especially for the government to understand people's context. I think grassroots approach is effective in implementing programs that adheres to the problem of the people. According to Malcolm Gladwell sa kanyang book na Outliers, no, success is predicted by structures. Sabi nga nila, sabihin naman natin na yung mga millionaires natin ay nag-start daw sa mga billionaires natin, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, nagsimula lang daw sila sa sa what they call that, sa parking lot. Doon sila nag-office, and then they consider themselves a self-made man. Pero according to Malcolm Gladwell, walang self-made man. The idea of success nitong mga taong ito ay nagawa lang nila ay hindi totoo, 'di ba? Parang si Bill Gates, supported siya by his parents na nanggaling din sa wealthy class, 'di ba? Si Donald Trump, 'di ba? Tinulungan siya ng parents niya na bigyan ng malaking malaking capital to start a business. No, so walang self-made man. What we can do for people to get opportunities, 'di ba, is to change the structures. 'Di ba? Palitan natin at baguhin natin yung mga structures to effectively help them achieve success. 'Di ba? Parang palitan natin yung kinikater natin na educational service sa student. Dapat school ang lumalapit sa mga estudyante, hindi yung estudyante ang lumalapit sa school. Dapat yung livelihood program, sila yung pumupunta sa mga communities to help them. Not the community ay pipila para tulungan sila ng gobyerno. So we changed the structures. Okay, we changed the healthcare system. Okay, we changed the educational landscape of the Philippines to effectively help those who are in need. Yeah.
And now I'm starting to see how your approach to grassroots movements, that specifically, I think I'm starting to see how that's at least with what we've been talking about, how that applies. I remember this in one of the classes I had before 1 year ago. Like we had the topic about I guess it also tackles socio-economic divide, but specifically I think I thought of I thought of pulling it out right now because we talked about meritocracy, and the equation of merit I think applies really good here. So it's an article by Vox, and they also have a video format of it. And the equation goes currently, or at least how, like what you've been, the example you've given, like with Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, and all the other, in that sense, quote unquote, self-made billionaires. Ability plus effort equals merit. And I think what's missing, it just really makes sense. And I think what's missing in the context of merit is its ability plus effort plus opportunities plus social good. And I don't know, I've been seeing it like you were talking about the farming system in the Philippines, agriculture. Like our family is also in that. Like my father recently started a farming business, and we've really seen, at least with the discussions we've had, like we've really seen that it's it's taking out the middleman, like in that sense. And I guess in that sense, what you're talking about, like the unjust structure, because usually that's what's capitalized on,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really reach the farmer himself. And it's really what I'm hearing is it's really a reframing of the current knowledge we have right now, and just questioning the current structures, or in that sense, the current status quo, and making it more humane, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Earlier din po, you said there are different factors in socioeconomic divide in besides your status in society, such as your gender or race, since you would also get different incomes depending if you're female or male.
Yeah.
So, and during the pandemic, we've also seen different community pantries all around the country, and we've also seen them being shut down because they've been red tagged.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Sadly.
yeah, here we can see that even though they're just trying to help the community, the people, authorities would still want to oppress them. So, in line with this, how does social economic discrimination manifest?
Okay. Yun nga, as I have mentioned earlier, okay, we as Filipinos need to reframe our idea of poverty or poor people as being tamad. Okay, they were just parang victims of the socio-economic structures, no? Hindi sila tamad. Wala lang silang opportunities, or masipag sila pero hindi sila na babayaran ng tama. It's because of the injustice in the system. Aside from that, yung mga socio-economic structure affecting human agency. Okay, anong example nun? Mas mataas ang tsansa na ma-drop out ang isang black American student as compared to white American student. Mas mataas ang tsansa na mag-drop out ang Filipino students sa Canada, no? As compared to ibang lahi. Yung mga socio-economic structures, it really affects the motivation of and drive of people to succeed. Okay, then for discrimination in basis of gender, 'di ba? The gender equal pay. Okay, mas marami pa ring babae ang hindi nabibigyan ng tamang pasweldo. Mas mababa pa rin na natatanggap nilang sweldo as compared to men, because we are thinking that men is more productive than women, or issue sa workplace, yung mga gays and lesbian for promotion. 'Di ba? Parang nakakatanggap sila ng ganong type of discrimination. Now for social injustice, I would just like to mention Bamboos, ano ba yung kantang yun, na ang hustisya ay para lang sa mayaman, 'di ba? 'Di ba?
We're talking about the
Tatsulok,
triangle, sir. Yeah.
the triangle, the tatsulok, 'di ba? Ang hustisya ay para lang sa mayaman. We can actually see this in our current political landscape, 'di ba? Na ang isang mamamayan na nakitang nag-violate ng IATF protocol, no, ay merong fine, may monetary fine, minsan nakukulong pa. But then a certain senator, somehow he did not disclose that his wife was infected by the COVID, and yet he roamed around the BGC, SNR, I don't know, pero hindi naman siya nahuli. 'Di ba? Maraming nagsasabi na from the government na you have to use your face mask and face shields all the time. But then again, makikita mo sila na hindi nagsusuot na or not following the proper protocol, 'di ba? Madaling napapalaya ang mga mayayaman, lalo na ang mga politiko, pero ang mga mahihirap, no? Wala silang access sa tama, sapat at pantay na justice system dito sa ating bansa. So yung discrimination in the very fabric of the society, parang is really manifested because of the difference in the social classes. At ang pinakakawawa doon ay hindi naman yung mga mayayaman. Ang pinakakawawa doon ay yung mga mahihirap. 'Di ba? See, the workers are begging for their parang salary increase sa mga mayayamang may-ari ng kumpanya. So, parang nagma-manifest talaga siya, and it's very evident, lalo na kung ang society natin very loose yung social class. Meron ka talagang poorest of the poor at meron kang wealthiest, 'di ba? So, yun yung problem. Doon nagkakaroon ng problema.
The divide, parang, can you say it normalizes the current status we're in right now? The divide normalizes it.
Yeah, but again, parang for the millennials and for the Gen Zs, no, they're kind of like woke to that kind of social injustices. Kaya I'm very happy with the young millennials and Gen Zs that they are kind of like woke, and they promote this kind of uh, social justice, equality, gender equality, 'di ba? Ayun. Understanding their privilege, ganon. So,
And
doon ako natutuwa.
those help out in I guess reframing the narrative of the social class also.
Yeah.
Like giving it more context. And in terms of context, like I've only heard of it now, like for example what you mentioned, the Filipino Canadian, or is it just Filipino? Like they migrated.
Filipino-Canadian Society
Yeah. What
in
happened with
Canada.
it?
Mataas daw ang dropout rate ng mga Filipino-Canadian doon sa Canada, as mentioned by a friend na nandoon or nanggaling doon. Yun yung problems ng Filipino-Canadian community sa Canada.
How does it what's affecting them?
Sa yung dropout rate, no, mataas. Actually, parang wala akong context about yung talagang raw data about it, how. But when we speak of structures, okay, yung structures affecting the motivation of the student, baka kasi may problem with racism. Ano na lang, no? Baka may problem with racism, baka may problem with dual mentality as well. Baka hindi nakikita ng mga estudyanteng Filipino-Canadian yung sense ng pag-aaral because the Canadian government is friendly to migrants, friendly to foreigners. So wala akong specific na answer kung bakit, because there were no study about it, but there were evidences, okay, that somehow support na may mataas na case daw ng dropout rate sa uh, Filipino-Canadian community.
That's all right, sir. I think it's okay that sometimes we also, I don't know, with I guess with that's something as researchers here in LBO, like that's something we've also learned, like it's also okay if to recognize our own at times when we don't meet the like the data, like
Mm,
acknowledging the fact that it's not yet present there, and like
mm,
we just try not to like we just state it at the same time, like acknowledge that we don't really know it, like that's okay. Yeah.
mm,
And like with context, I think, how do we go about like the current government, like how does it and I think we've touched upon it already, like in what ways does our government perpetuate the economic divide for harmful reasons, like what I mentioned, like context. I think context is really important in terms of like tackling the issues at hand, in terms of like the differences in each person, with like
mm,
the fact that we're not, I guess, with what I've gotten from the conversation currently, like we're not born into the social classes, we're born into the social classes, we're born into the social classes we're currently in, and at the same time that's not in our control, but
mm.
we can do something to parang change and reframe the current status quo. And how what are the current things that our current government perpetuates in terms of the socio-economic divide? You've mentioned it already, like stuff like not following the current laws in terms of like the masks, right?
Yeah,
Um,
protocols.
yeah, protocols. And
Mm.
how else can we? What other things in the current state of the government like must we look out for?
Yeah,
I guess one of the things here is like the red tagging and
mm,
um
I agree with.
yeah.
Yeah, as mentioned in your in your statement earlier, no, I think one of the things that really that the government no perpetuate the socio-economic divide is the case of rampant corruption here in the Philippines. So, and also yung no accountability of the government, no, not listening to the real experts as to what to do with the current COVID situation. Okay, tama ba na ang pagbantayin natin sa mga ay militar, or solusyong militar ba talaga dapat yung ating approach in terms of our COVID response, or should we listen more to the medical experts in the field? Okay, and also nakakawala kasi ng tiwala sa government if a certain, as mentioned earlier nga, if a certain politico or politician did not follow the said protocol, and he was not held accountable with it, 'di ba? Ayun, no? Then on the human quality, or on the human side, no, yung selfishness ng ating government, or maybe ng mga tao sa ating government, na isipin yung sarili kay bago makatulong sa mga tao, iniisip na, no, they are looking forward to the 2022 election, nangangampanya na, no, maaga nang nangangampanya, nagpapaprinta ng mga tarpaulin, nagpapapogi na, nagpapaganda na sa social media, pero pag hiningan mo kung ano yung dapat nating gawin sa current COVID situation, wala silang maihain na na yeah na solusyon, no. Aside from that, yung mga nangako ng mga politiko na they will address certain issues in the community or in our society, but wala kang makikitang wala kang makikita sa kanila ngayon anong ginagawa nila, 'di ba? So I think, no, aside from no accountability and the rampant corruption, it is also a human problem, to be selfish Okay? Pero dapat yung ilagay natin sa ating government ay inuuna muna yung iba bago ang sarili.
And like, I think with going back to the dole out mentality, I think the framework that should be there, or the framework that should be present is the people or the masses aren't entitled to be helped, but the government is expected to help the people, right? I think that's what the dole mentality tries to tackle.
Okay, and then moving on to our last question. Since we've talked about the current state of our government and its officials and how they influence socio-economic divide in our country, what must the government and the masses do to help Filipinos in the lower classes? Is there any modern and attainable solution to the socio-economic divide?
I think the government, if not corrupt and self-serving, will do its duty to uplift human lives. As I've said earlier, I think the best way to uplift human lives is to provide programs, enact laws that are pro-poor. Especially, sila talaga yung may kailangan sa ating society. Policies must be progressive is in a sense that they are attainable and realistic. Yung mga policies and plans ng ating government should be attainable and realistic para makikita ng tao na may ginagawa sila at natapos nila yung mga dapat nilang gawin. Second is context-based. It has to be on the sense that they take in the consideration what is the community needs for that particular program. Parang kung nasa tabi sila ng ilog, no, use that geography or use that opportunity to make use of that ilog. Ano yung mga pwedeng programs for them? No, siguro aside from that, pwede ding i-consider ng government yung safety, yung disaster risk reduction ng mga taong ito, no? So kung nandoon ka naman sa taas ng bundok, ano yung mga pwede mong programs for them? It has to be context-based. And most especially, the policies must also be inclusive in a sense that it seeks to help all of the people regardless of their social class, regardless of their gender, regardless of their context. Parang you must really help them, no? It has to be inclusive. Now, I think for me, ang isang pamahalaan na may puso at hindi sarili lang ang iniisip will really do or will really implement programs na makakatulong talaga sa ating kapwa Pilipino. Pero kapag ang gobyerno ay may sariling interes na gusto para lang sa sarili, na talagang isa-set aside niya yung mga nangangailangan para lang matulungan niya yung sarili niya. Now, as per people, as per masses, to help alleviate the socio-economic divide and discrimination, kung if there is a chance for you to study, okay, if you are granted education, take it. Mag-aral. Okay? Kasi lamang talaga ang may alam, 'di ba? So kung mabigyan ka ng opportunity to study and to receive education, grab it. Kunin mo 'yon and do your best with it, no? I-inform ang mga tao sa mga dapat nilang malaman. Okay? Yun yung siguro pwedeng gawin ng masses to do help and alleviate socio-economic divide and discrimination, and also ask for a better government, no? Criticize the government in the sense that you don't want the government to fall, but no, parang highlight the best policies that parang that they did for the society, and criticize yung mga policies na nakikita nyong hindi maayos, hindi totoo, okay, at higit sa lahat hindi nakakatulong sa kapwa Pilipino. So walang problema sa pag-criticize ng government, no? And also educate yourself to pick or to choose your future leaders that will help you. Hindi yung nagyabang lang nung campaign na pupunta ako ng West Philippines Sea, itutusok ko yung flag, tas hindi naman pala gagawin. Or in 3 to 6 months, matatapos na yung problem natin with corruption and drugs. Give me 3 to 6 months. Pero after 4 years, 5 years, ang sasabihin ay, wala tayong magagawa for corruption because it is embedded in our system. I do not believe that it is embedded in our system. Ayun lang. So I think be wise talaga for the masses. Okay, at kung sa tingin mo meron ka ng tamang knowledge at meron ka ng tamang idea na parang help someone, educate them kasi hindi lahat talaga may access to proper and inclusive education.
Yeah, sir. In terms of like inclusivity, I think with everything that you've said and with everything we've talked about, it's really, I guess, the purpose of the podcast is really, along with that, is really to have conversation and to talk about things that really matter. And I think that's really important, especially in these times and moving forward. I remember one of the conversations I had earlier with my friend that we were talking about. I guess I wanted this I wanted a soundboard with him, and like one of the things he said was like commodifying the good act to get pogi points isn't really a good act, regardless if you post it on social media. So I guess that one nuance take I've gotten from this conversation too. And yeah, context really matters. How about you, Mary?
For me, this podcast has really been very enlightening. It's true. I totally agree that we should call action from the government, especially with the upcoming elections. We should do our part as citizens, even if it doesn't affect us, or even if we're in the upper class, we should still care for our co-Filipinos, because though it's a very sad reality we have right now, everyone deserves to have a life that is fair and just, which doesn't hinder them to achieve success.
Yeah. And then like one more thing. Like I think we all owe it to ourselves to determine our own journey and where we want to go. And so autonomy, yeah, is really important for each and every person. And context-based and humanistic policies do help.
Okay, so before we close, how about you, Sir Ian? Do you have any final words to our
Yeah.
audience?
Thank you for inviting me here in your podcast. Likas-Bayan and Ugnayan are avenues for awakening the minds of young Filipinos to take action and help one another in finding reduce inequalities in aspiring a better society for everyone. Kaya bilang guro ng araling panlipunan, naniniwala ako sa movement ng youth, no, na gumawa ng to do certain action, okay, to inspire change in our society. And with that, I want you to really get important things and learning from your education. Do it. Maging magaling kayo dyan sa pag-aaral ninyo para kapag nakagraduate kayo, hindi na lang kayo engineer, hindi na lang kayo doktor, hindi na lang kayo teacher, at iba pang profession kung hindi, kayo ay engineer na may puso, engineer na makabayan, teacher na mahalang bansa, kasi kakailanganin natin ng mga ganong uri ng individual. And thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you for inviting me again, guys.
Glad to have you, sir.
Okay. Welcome, sir. And that is it for this week's episode of Ugnayan. Thank you so much, Sir Ian, for being here with us to discuss this very important issue. We hope the audience learned just as much as we have.
Stay tuned for our next Ugnayan episode, all about what it takes to become an ally, advocate, or activist. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.